You ever get a glimpse into what you wanted, but it ended up being not quite what you were hoping for? While LA indie odds vets Silversun pickups have spent a lot of their post-Neck of the Woods material messing with ways to blend their synthetics so harmoniously with their roots in 90s-inspired shoegaze alt-rock, it's also brought out a mixed bag of results in my opinion. In spite of Neck of the Woods still being my favorite of theirs, I also regard its follow-up Better Nature to be their worst, because a doubling down on those synths just made the group's blandest album to date. What makes their latest album Physical Thrills interesting is that it sees them coming back together with the person that I thought took their foundation and did the most obvious thing with it. Which, while I took issues with that initially, given where the production ended up on this newest excursion, I'm left wishing it was more like Widow's Weeds. With that being said, I'd consider Physical Thrills their 5th best album. Why? Well, I'll admit, even if it's that low in the ranking, it's still got good ideas. The elements I do like, I think, reaffirm the real strengths that shine with this band as a unit. That chemistry between their bass and drums that I love dazzles in this middle pocket of the album that starts with the Rager Hidden Moon, a track that honestly feels like a cut from Neck of the Woods in the best way possible, with its full moon werewolf-style lust, and the 2 groovier cut System Error and the synthetic bass lead. A track that sees Nikki taking a more vocal-driven aspect, weaving well with Brian's raspier voice to create an incredibly catchy track. I love the way the synths add a texture to it as well, that sort of evolve this fuzz that this album tries to pull off in a similar way to Widow's Weeds, but I don't think does quite as well. She adds a similar energy to the slower crawling quicksand, adding to the emotional atmosphere under Brian's performance on a track Rot from Frustration, along with taking a soul vocal performance on the second single and on one of the Dream Tempo interludes. Both performances I like. She fits the atmosphere the group pulls together on Alone on a Hill especially. I like how the song evolves sonically around this track about dissecting from the negative spins in your life.
I don't wanna get caught in the freeze.
It's funny, when looking into these songs, it sounds like Brian wanted Nikki on more of it vocally, and from what she delivers, it's easy to see why. It lends to the album well. Even if it'll come up more negatively later in this video, I enjoy the sounds on Hereafter Way After. It's a track that I'm not shocked got a video, where Butch Vig's production pivots the ideas he helped craft on Widow's Weeds into a solid shift that meets more in the middle to the band's own brand of alt-rock. It also has a neat turn of phrase in the chorus that fits in the same realms as other singles of theirs. Something that I think also crops up on Sticks and Stones. The homogeny of sounds also shines well on Stay Down, Way Down. That acoustic shine under the electric guitar gels with the drums. That bass production on those aforementioned groovier tracks too is super choice. When it comes to real detractors for me, there are some glaring ones that set the album back. The hammering home of some of those concepts is something I don't think quite comes completely across this time around. An MO I'm finding the band isn't a stranger to doing, given what I'd said about the aforementioned favorite album of theirs. While I can tell they really want to create an album that toys with concepts of dreaming and seemingly the connection between it and one's relationships, admittedly a concept I'd be really jazzed to hear, especially with the darker potential that can erupt from that inspiration in parts of what this album does bring to the table. I just don't think it's a record that is as rewarding as the spring it jumps from. Starting with those Dream Tempo interludes, while I enjoy the one Nikki is on, I don't really care for the other two. I like the intensity on 310, and how it tries to bridge the melodies together with a sort of weird, sinister tone to the revelation within. It just kind of falls flat for me, and it kind of could take or leave the outro one on top of that. I think the band doing this to make the themes more direct is a good idea. They just don't leave much of an impression. Same with the recurring Way titles. While great songs, they just don't feel purposeful in execution in the broader pieces of the album. I'm guessing it could stem from experiments that didn't quite land too, but some of the production choices on here really don't work in my opinion. I talked about how I didn't like the guitars and Scared together. I think the acoustic version they dropped earlier this year was a better version. Kind of shows a twist on that kind of groove that I think works for this band in particular, especially with the emotional sort of tone of that track. Another track where the production just sounds off on top of being one of the songs that I think kind of feels underbaked as a whole is We Won't Come Out. The bass production on the second half is pretty choice, but it's an instance where the guitars feel kind of buried in the mix. The pianos feel super flat too. A song that I enjoy that also gets a little ruined in the mixing is Quicksand. I like where Brian sits in the mix with the booming kick and the thundering bass. Even when the strings and lighter instruments come in, it fits. But once the rest of the drums come in, it just kind of takes me out, which is weird to say for a Silversun pickup song, honestly. But moments like those, along with my disinterest in the interludes because the lack of deep exploration in the themes on the other tracks that would be enriched with interludes like this, makes them feel more like filler and really bog down the back end. Yeah, it opens with a really strong stretch, but I just don't think it closes as gracefully. That kind of ending can't be seen on the band's fourth best album, though, Widow's Weeds, a project that I actually like a lot more on the other side of spinning it for this video. Sure, it's not swoon, and it'll never be swoon in my opinion. It captures its mood far more consistently than Physical Thrills. While I initially ragged on it saying it felt like Butch making the band sound more like a direct comparison the group was sort of pigeonholed into from the start, it more kind of feels like a safe play to get a feel for each other's sort of creative energy now that they've worked together again. I will say I'd much rather have this hazier touch that adds richness to those synths and strings than whatever was going on in pockets of that. It creates this good backdrop for a more thematically emotional lyric sheet. Mourning and growth is a big component of the title track with its nice catchy chorus, where Nikki and Brian's vocals again gel so well together, and how growth from grief shapes you permeates in other ways around it. The immediate pains within the opener Neon Wound, how the chorus of Freakazoid sounds like the anxious thoughts condemning its narrator, where relationships go from there, like on the Fuzzy Buzzy Simpatico, the weaving of strings with their synths feeling more like a marriage of Swoon and Neck of the Woods on tracks like the Lower Key Straw Man, or the energetic It Doesn't Matter Why, which admittedly is one of the more underwritten songs IMO. It at least has a decent backdrop. I've thrown heaps of praise at its closer We Are Champions in the past too, and I still think while it's a hard pivot from a lot of the themes the album is dwelling in, I see it more as a setup stinger closer. It has this targeted spite towards millionaires that sounds personal. Plus, it's a moment that gives this emotional atmosphere even more bite to close things out. It's a grower. That drum and bass play on Songbirds too adds some energy that gives the back half a good ramp. It's just a bit tighter all around, and I can appreciate that more 4 years later. That more or less is why I like Physical Thrills as much as I do within the context of the Silversun Pickups discography. It does have a handful of moments that stand out for sure, and it's a much more interesting spin than Better Nature at the end of the day. What do you think of the album though? Does it get more rotations for you? Do you wish they did things differently? Let me know your thoughts on it in this video in the comments down below. If you did like it, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. Thank you again so very much for watching. I have been Viral Rag. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.